Welcome to Seatton Education. I'm your host, Victoria. Every week, we talk to expert guests from around the world to show that home education really can be an achievable alternative to conventional schooling. Joining me today is Tamara Strijack, the Academic Dean of the Neufeld Institute, where she uses developmental science to help families better understand their children. The founder of the Institute, Gordon Neufeld, is the author of the book Hold On To Your Kids, Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Peers. And Tamara wrote the book Reclaiming Our Students, Why Children Are More Anxious, Aggressive and Shut Down Than Ever, and What We Can Do About It. She also home-educated her own 2 daughters. Tamara, hi, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, delighted to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Can you give us an introduction to the attachment-based approach to child development, developmental science in this area?
Sure, yes. Well, and I think that the most helpful analogy here would be that of a plant. What does this plant need to grow? We're not concentrating on the behavior. We're not trying to get an apple out of it, especially if it's a cactus. We're concentrating on what does this plant need to grow. And developmental science is very similar this way, where it's about what are the conditions that a child needs to flourish, to learn, to function in their environment. And so with this plant analogy, we also can extend it to this idea of the roots. And one of the foundational pieces of this approach is this idea that attachment also develops. Our capacity for relationship develops. Those roots deepen. And as the roots deepen, there is more room that spontaneously there is the development of the child unfolds, the stronger the roots are. So as the roots go down, maturation goes up. The child grows, the child is able to learn, the child is able to take in. And, to mix the metaphors, as the roots go deeper, the child grows wings and or becomes the fruit, whoever it is. But I love to picture, this idea that then that's part of what we're hoping to do as parents, as caring adults in a child's life, is to help them feel like they have a strong base that they can grow from, and that ideally we want a child who is reaching their potential in the world. And so that's really what a developmental approach trusts in, and this particular approach trusts in nature's design that the child could reach their potential if given the right conditions, whether that is to become an apple or a cactus, whatever kind of plant, just to use that analogy, whatever they're meant to be. And so just to add to that, so what are these conditions? Well, attachment is one of them, is that ability for a child to sink into relationship, to rest in relationship with those who are meant to be caring for them. So that's one. And in that process, that they can find some rest, that they're able to feel the feelings of being satiated, of being nurtured and nourished, and that will sink in, that they're not, they're at rest, and that they're not in alarm mode all the time. And so often, I say a bit more about this at some point, but so often we find our children with their alarm system activated. And when your alarm system is activated, you can't grow and be alarmed at the same time. You can't learn and be alarmed at the same time. And so it really is about finding this place of rest that we can learn and grow from. And with that also, as I mentioned, is access to one's feelings, that we're able to feel our both satiated, but also feel sadness when something isn't working. That this turns out to be a really important feeling to feel is sadness and disappointment, and that is all part of our development, and then of course play. The play mode is we're discovering through neuroscience. I mean, we knew this for years and years before this, centuries before, but we've lost touch with this, is how important play is in our children's lives, in our own lives.
Really interesting, and I think you've touched on there this idea of a child being in the optimal position to develop and grow and thrive, and particularly getting out of that fight or flight mentality where they actually are bogged down with these other stresses. Something that we have seen across the world is this rise in home education at the moment. In particular, there's a lot more people home educating their children than 10 or 20 years ago. And people are citing all sorts of reasons for that. But one of the reasons people are saying is that actually they're seeing their children experience really extreme stress and anxiety within perhaps a conventional school setting. And could you maybe speak to how this particular approach is perhaps especially relevant to children, to parents who have chosen not just to parent their children, but also to educate them?
Yes, well, it naturally flows from this because, as you mentioned, alarm could certainly be activated for a lot of students in a school setting. A school setting was not made necessarily with the child in mind. It's made with a set of expectations. It's made with the idea of putting 20 to 30 same-age children together in one room with one teacher. It doesn't allow for the nuances of meeting different children's needs and or their levels of learning and what they're capable of. So it really is a system that was created a long time ago that isn't serving our particular needs now. And so what I've found, and I do a lot of consulting with families who are choosing to learn at home. Of course, there was a huge surge of this during the pandemic because a lot of people were finding themselves learning at home, but they were actually, a lot of them, trying to do school at home, and it was just as alarming.
Yes.
So the idea of being at home, for the most part, and usually home is the best place for these conditions to be present, right? When we look at the conditions needed to grow and to learn, home has the potential to be the best environment for that. When we can bring a child to rest, when that alarm is not activated constantly, when there's room for emotions to move, at least at some point during the day, we're not trying to hold it all in, then the learning can actually, the sky's the limit. There's no, we're not confined by that structure that is the necessity of society at this point.
And when you talk about the structures that are in place in schools, a big obvious one is that idea of being in a class of 30 other children your own age. And I found, and I know a lot of my previous guests have found, the work that Gordon Neufeld and the Institute more generally has done into excessive peer influence so interesting. And I think in many cases that's been really fundamental actually in a lot of parents' decisions to take their children out of a heavily peer-driven environment. Can you explain that to people who might not know that research and what problems have been found with that model?
Yes, well, we were not designed to be put together in same age groupings. And so in this kind of artificial setting, what we do is we actually force our children into situations where they are orienting around each other because there is no adult there taking care of them. And so what can happen is as a child starts to orient more and starts to take their cues from starts to look to their peers to be accepted, to matter, to be important, to be acknowledged, to be the same as, all of these different ways that they're looking to their peers, it takes them out of orbit with the adults who are meant to be guiding them, whether it's their parent or their teacher or their grandparents. It actually puts you on the other side of that attachment magnet. So now they're taking their cues directly from the peers, and you no longer have that influence. They're speaking their peers' language now, not your language. They are for looking to what matters. There's so much more potential for wounding Right, because peers. Now, I was actually a school counselor for many years, and I in those middle years of 10 to 13, where there's such a tender sensitivity to what others think, the children were so cruel to each other. Unintentionally perhaps, but they didn't know how to take care of each other's needs the same way. Sometimes there's exceptions to this. But for the most part, peers aren't meant to be taking care of peers. They're meant to be embedded in this kind of cascading care where there's an adult taking care of the child and hopefully another adult, an elder, taking care of that adult, taking care of the child, and at least being able to provide guidance and direction. And this is how language is passed down. This is how our cultures were traditionally set up this way. And we've kind of flatlined it a little bit. And so we're running into a lot of problems because now they're not looking to us for the answers or to be the answer. They're looking to each other. And this is a challenge. And maybe if I could just give an example of this, Victoria, because this is what happened to my oldest child, who is now, she's now 25, but when she was actually still 4 years old. So she was at the young end. She turned 5 in December and she started kindergarten. So when she was still 4 years old, she was quite young. I didn't understand a lot of this back then. I just want to give that caveat. I didn't quite get all these pieces of that attachment was really important. I need to help her find ways to hold on to me. And she went into school. She was excited on one hand, but she was also very much, it was almost too much separation for her to handle with her father and I. And so she quickly, in all of her alarm, landed on this one little girl in her class who ended up being her best friend, who happened to look exactly like her little sister, right?
Interesting.
She was scanning, right? She was scanning. We can't even tell them apart now when we look back at pictures. But he landed on her as being her answer because her alarm was so high. And she actually did have a wonderful teacher. But that teacher wasn't able to have that influence because she landed on this girl. And she wouldn't go to school if that girl was not in the school, not in class that day. He came home laughing like this girl, talking like this girl. Oh my goodness, what's happened? This is only kindergarten and I've lost my child. I don't even recognize her anymore. And you see how this can happen. And when there is alarm, when the child is scanning for who can I find to keep me safe? Only the irony is they can't keep you safe. That little girl couldn't take care of my little girl. And so when I saw this at the end of that year, I thought, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine sending her in that was a half day of school, of kindergarten back then. Now it's a full day everywhere where I live. It was too much. It was too much for her. So I thought, we got to do something different. We got to try something different. I never even thought of homeschooling before. It certainly wasn't something we thought of in our generation where I lived. But I happened to hear my father speak on the radio talking about a conference he was doing on home education. And I thought, oh, maybe I should give this a try. It was before I started working with him, and I've been working with him for almost 20 years now. But it was sort of the beginning of that journey. And I thought, I'm going to try. I'm going to try it. And I started to look at, the conditions that were needed. I said, I got to get her back. And I started to take initiative. We had coffee dates every week where we would go to the coffee shop, which happened to be also a chocolate factory, which was quite beautiful. So she had hot chocolate, hot cocoa, and I had coffee. And we would read together. And it was a date we had every week. It was such a precious time. I felt like I got my girl back. We read together. We enjoyed the reading. That was, some stealth home learning right there. Just reading a book is learning, right? That's one of the keys, was the key for me in my own homeschooling journey. But I got her back. And then I thought, this is working. How do I send her back now? How? Let's keep going. And that's how I first started that journey.
I think I'm really pleased that you touched on your experience of having your daughter at that young age, because experience those issues, because sometimes I think people say, well, maybe when they get to high school, this is a problem. And actually, a lot of the people I've spoken to have said, no, yes, certainly there's a problem at high school, but the problem could set in a long way before that. And if you don't deal with it, whether your child is home educated or not, you're going to store up bigger problems for later. So can you give us an idea of, I love the idea of the coffee date, but just a couple of other ways we can get our children to want to attach to us? Because that, you say that phrase, I lost my little girl, and I can't tell you, Tamara, how many people have said that exact phrase to me. We sent our boy to school and I lost my son. Or, oh, enjoy it whilst they're young because you'll lose them the minute they go to school. Yeah. And that really worries me, because there's 2 points that, who are you losing them to? Some people say, oh, well, we're lucky they had a good teacher. But often it's not the teachers they're losing them to. And secondly, this idea of, that close communion that they could be in with a loving adult, a parent. Surely we need to learn how to cherish that. Can you give us some pointers on how to do that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say it's very hard to do this alone. And I'd say that the first thing is you got to build your village. If you don't have one already, you've got to build your village, because I actually considered myself more of a facilitator of my children's learning, and I wanted to gather people around. And because that serves 2 things. Well, actually, no, it serves more like 3 things. When you gather people around you, it's a support for you as a parent, right? So it takes the pressure off it all having to be you. So if you can bring in a grandparent, even if it's a surrogate grandparent, to do, maybe a history lesson, or they teach them how to build an engine, or I don't know, whatever it happens to be, or calligraphy in my mother's case, and as she was helping share her special gifts with my children. There's the other piece of that is they start to get embedded in other adult attachments. So their village grows. So now not only are you not doing this alone, not only are they learning from someone other than you, and you're building the capacity for when you can't do it all yourself, which you can't do it all yourself, at least not without some severe consequences of, being completely focused with this. And I don't think we were meant to. We're meant to have other voices in our children's education, in our children's, not just education, but in our children's lives. And so, part of that for our village is we joined an agricultural club. It's called 4-H. In our community, we were on a farm, and I met other families through that. And through this, it also helped with their learning, but it also helped mean that the leaders there, they also looked to these leaders. I mean, yes, they were involved with the other families, but it was a more natural grouping. It was younger students, older children, leaders who were sometimes seniors and sometimes in their early 20s. It is a whole range of people, and they got used to that not needing to necessarily look to be exclusive to a peer, right? Because there was others there and others involved. And then I got involved in that group, and I was one of the leaders. And I gathered the people around me. I gathered the potential peers or those relationships. I knew those people. They came for dinner or games night, or we went to activities together. I became part of their lives. And so if there is, if there are other people, or you have a concern because the peers are taking over, invite them into your home. Be the umbrella, that holds them together, and don't. I guess the other piece of that is not to shy away from it. They need you, even if they're pushing you away. They need you, and to find your way in there. I learned what kinds of music my girls liked, and I would take them to concerts, and I would listen to the music with them, and we'd watch these shows together, and it wasn't that we didn't do some of those things. It's not that watching shows is a bad thing, but do it together. Do it together so that you have some way to communicate with each other, and be on the same page. Don't stay. Don't be shut out of the room.
Yes. I think that's such a good phrase. I was actually just speaking today to a homeschooling mum and her 15-year-old daughter, and they were talking about the magazines that they like. And I thought it was a really funny thing. I thought, I bet you would not get a lot of teenage girls saying, we, meaning my mother and I, enjoy reading these magazines. But, her mum was making an effort to read the magazines with her so that they can chat about it. And she didn't, what I love when I do meet homeschooling families is that these phrases are normal to them. It was normal to her that they said, oh yeah, we love this magazine, you should read it. And I also thought it was interesting that her 15-year-old daughter was saying that to me. I'm sadly not 15. But, I've noticed that, as you were saying with that 4-H experience, a lot of home educating families, it isn't just that they mix with other children of different ages, which people often cite, but also that they see family dynamics, not just their own families, modeled a lot. They see other children with their parents in attendance at an activity, or maybe a grandparent of someone else who's working with another child. And I think they see that idea of a multi-generational, multifaceted village that you mentioned. They just see examples of that a lot more than someone in a more mainstream setting might. I don't know about where you live in Canada, where we live in the UK, really from the age of 1-2 years old, it's almost impossible to find stay and play groups. It's you drop your child off and you go. And so even from the age of 2, children just don't see parents sticking around. If they're doing something that is outside of their house, they don't expect there to be parents there. And they certainly don't expect there to be other aged children there. And so this idea of what's normal attachment, there's no examples of it. So of course we're not seeing it. I find that really interesting, If there's no example, how do we expect a child to absorb that behavior?
Yes. Well, and you bring up something that comes up a lot here in Canada, and we don't necessarily we have some of that, but it's more about, we have to have play dates. We have to socialize our children. They have to learn. It's like taking your dog out to a park and letting them off leash. I think that is important. But for children, there's lacking the context of realizing it's too soon. The time for social interaction comes, natural development comes when you feel strong in your attachment roots, when you have a secure home base. Then it allows you to become your own person. You can differentiate. You can be a bit different then. You can find your own voice, right? Know who you are, know your thoughts, your ideas. This is what's meant to happen as we have our attachment rates. This is about, usually adolescence is where, we get little hints of that as we go, but adolescence is the real time for this. When we have that voice, we're confident with our own thoughts and ideas, and this ebbs and flows even as adults, this ebbs and flows, right? Then we can come together with other people and not lose ourselves and lose our ideas. As I mentioned with my daughter, she lost her voice. Literally, she started to sound like, use the language of this other little girl. And it's when we put children together prematurely and that they're not ready yet, then it's very hard for them to hold on to their own ideas. And so they do start looking to their peers and wondering, is this okay? And now, with technology and some of the social media and that, it's making it 1,000 times worse. Hard to compete with that and hard to reduce the alarm of what all of that looks like in the online world. But to have that strength, so those other multi-age attachments give them a chance both to receive care from others and different people in their life, to see other things modeled, like you say, healthy relationships, but also a chance for them to take care of younger children or be in that position of considering what might that child need. And I've seen huge growth of my own children when they were able to be part of taking care of younger students or having older students. Like my cousins came in when they were teenagers, when my kids were younger, and they taught them songs, music songs to learn math because, pass that on to them, and they just would have a wonderful time together. And so it's this multi-age is so getting lost. Like you say, we're not seeing examples of that except in some of these rare places of, maybe community theater, or I don't even know where else it still is, but we need it back, and we need to do it ourselves if it's not happening in the world.
Yeah. And I think that home education, the choice to home educate, is a lot of parents' response to these pressures that we're talking about. But I think, as we talked about, sometimes people feel like the environment is not optimal anymore. We don't have, we generally don't live in a multi-generational environment. My question is, can we do this? Like, can we reclaim these relationships, or is society too far gone?
Oh, I definitely think we can reclaim them. The title of the book, Reclaiming Our Students, that just makes me think of the reclaiming, right? Hold on to your kids. It's the same idea. And, my colleague, Hannah Beach, who I co-wrote that book with, the idea is that we were writing it primarily for educators, but I also wrote in some pieces that applied specifically to home education there as well, because I feel like it applies across the board. We need to get back in the lead. And we need to be the ones to take initiative. We can't wait till the systems change, till the culture changes. We've got to, when we see the need, we've got to take the lead and step in. And how are we going to do this? Yes, we have to get creative. We have to get creative. We have to think outside the box. But nobody's going to do it for us. Yeah. And so I think it is. I definitely think it's possible. I have a lot of hope.
And that's why I love, and why I wanted to speak to you, because it's why I love what you're doing at the Neufeld Institute, because yes, we can all, lobby for institutional change and for governmental change for our education systems to fundamentally be rewritten. But that's actually very little solace if you have a child under 18 here and now.
Exactly.
Because great, you can campaign for 25 years, but that's not the case for the people listening to this podcast. The people listening to this have children now, and they want they are real people whose lives they want to affect. And I think it's that balance of showing the research and accepting these problems exist, and also making it tangible and practical and achievable. So I really hope that anyone watching this will look further into what you're offering, because I think it's so valuable. Can I just touch a little on your personal experience? Were you working alongside the period when your children were being educated, and how did you balance that?
Yeah, very good question. Yes, I was. And yes, it was challenging, especially in the early years. That's when I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I did have to rely on my village a lot. I had to bring in, grandparents and others in the community, for other things. I had grandma's quilting. It was literally a grandma who was teaching quilting. It was so beautiful. My girl learned how to sew. I brought in, others who were doing these math games, and grandparents who then were just a little bit more intentional with the time that they spent and loved to be part of their learning journey. It helped them feel important too, and sharing some of their stories. And so I did have to be intentional to bring others in. And their father was also very supportive. It could be hard. I know it's not always the case where you agree on this. I've worked with many families where they have different philosophies of education, so you don't always have that support. I was fortunate in that, and we could kind of tag team a little bit. I had a bit of flexibility, so I was working from home, but I really had to make sure that my work at home, that I wasn't trying to do that while I was there in the room with them, because they would very quickly pick up that I wasn't accessible, and that was even harder. It was even harder to hold the space. So I had to learn and find the balance. And as I got older, it was about creating a rhythm where I always went for connection first, times of connection first, fill them up, and then you see then they had a bit of emergence, a bit of independent study, a bit of independent play and exploration. We were very play-based, especially if I started to understand how important that was, exploration mode, learning. I was even just talking to my daughter. My younger daughter is 23 now. She came to me really excited one day because she was just like, Mommy, can I do a PowerPoint on Jupiter? And we were reflecting on the fact that she loved space so much. And I had to kind of like leave things around. Like she had a lot of forward energy, but if it was my idea and I was making her do it, then there was more resistance. So it had to be in the play mode. For her, that was play. She loved to play in PowerPoint and made things I didn't even know were possible on PowerPoint. And it was her way of, I thought, well, this is great. I can check this off the list. And I was, secretly delighted. But when, it was the idea of leading things around, books on space, having things there and available for them it wasn't necessarily about me teaching her it. It was about facilitating that learning, seeing where the interest was, allowing it to come out and be expressed in different ways. And that helped me a lot because when I was working, I would have pockets where I would need to be, focused on one thing. And I needed to bring some of these other pieces in and create a bit of a rhythm to the day. And I have to say our reading together was one of my favorite parts of our entire journey. And it was a wonderful break for me and my work as well, to just sit together and read a good book. Yeah.
Yes, I think people never touch on the benefits that homeschooling gives the homeschooling parent.
Yes.
And that's so true. It's if you are combining it with work, it is a very different pace and focus and relationship deep moment that it's sometimes very nice to have that counterbalance between different sides of your brain as the adult. And I think that's so true. Is there anything I've missed? Any key bits, takeouts that you would give to home educating parents or people considering it?
Yeah, I think just remembering that a child can't learn if they're not at rest. And so often we have wonderful ideas, or we're trying to choose a curriculum, and it's not about the curriculum. It's about where is the child at? How do they learn? Are they at rest, or is their alarm on? If their alarm system is activated, how do we bring them to rest? Do they need to move more? Do they need to get some of their frustration out because they're elevated, they're escalated more? When we're at home, we have the opportunity to make some more space for this, and that can make all the difference in the world. We need to make space for some of those places where their emotions can come out and play too, in the arts and music and writing, all these different places where it can be a place of expression, where there's places where we could take the pressure off performance. We have the advantage of being able to do this at home. And yet often we get stuck in feeling like we have to do it right, that we're trying to put that pressure on our kids. And so I think that's a huge learning for me, is how to take the pressure off, how to create space for them to be in the play mode and explore different things, engage in their content, hands-on learning, bring other people in. Don't do it all yourself. Read lots. It's wonderful for yourself as well, and the connection with your children. Historical fiction, but also just really good literature, fun stories, the whole gamut. They will learn how to read this way. Both my children. I have one who's an editor now, and she never had any formal grammar classes. She just read a lot of good books. And it's amazing what can happen when we can do that. So and trust nature's design. Slow it down. Don't be in such a hurry. Trust that nature is going to get them there, that there is a design. If we can create those conditions, don't get caught up in others' expectations. I was so quick to get caught up in what other people thought. Trust yourself, trust nature, trust what you see your child needs. I guess that's the biggest piece of all.
Tamara, thank you so much. Absolute gems of wisdom there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And all the best to all of you.
And thank you so much for joining Seatton Education today. Whether you watched us on YouTube or you listened as a podcast, Please subscribe, like, and comment, because it really does help us reach other people to show how home education can be an achievable alternative to conventional schooling. I hope to see you next time.